Hey all, welcome to today's channel chat. This one is part of a series that we're doing on hot button issues in MMOs, where we're looking for different perspectives on some polarizing topics. And joining us today is Born Reddy. Thanks for joining us, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, appreciate you coming here. You're coming all the way from Australia, right?
Yep. Perth, Western Australia. Other side of the world, basically. We're exactly 12 hours apart.
Yeah, awesome. This is the latest interview, or like latest channel chat I've done, so this is cool. Awesome. So we're going to tackle some of the thorniest topics in MMOs today. I look forward to where you stand on this. Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we talked about, like I've dipped my toe into MMOs over the years, so I hope my perspective is helpful in some way, but I'm coming in as a fresh face, as somebody who's like really starting to appreciate MMOs and coming to I guess be sad that I missed the glory days, or at least that's what I hear. So I'm kind of curious on your insights as well on that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great perspective for the series, because one of the things that you hear a lot is that MMOs are dying, and then that begs the question: are any new players coming in? So you are a unicorn. You're a new player coming into MMOs, so that's great. So I guess before maybe we tackle the first topic, do you want to give us a little bit on your gaming background? Like, what's your arc through gaming look like?
Oh, sure. So my gaming started with my mum buying me a PlayStation 1. I can't even remember how old I was. Well, obviously way back in the day, the PS1s had come out. She thought I was going to put it down after a week, and yet here I am, 32 years old, still playing games every second I can.
Nice.
Look, video games have always been like my favorite medium, my favorite activity, I suppose. Like I'm always playing games. I've always been playing games. I play pretty much everything. Like my kind of childhood, like core memories there are like the old Crash Bandicoot, Croc, graduating to like Call of Duty and stuff like that. I was a console kid, so all shooters. Missed the glory days of things like CS. I'd say like my first MMO would be RuneScape. Do people consider that an MMO? I think it technically is, but it's like on the light side. Played quite a lot of Guild Wars 2. And then I kind of hadn't touched MMOs for a while. I went through a League of Legends phase, sadly. I think, there's a decent amount of the community that went through a phase of just pure depression for 5 or 6 years I played League of Legends. And then since then, I've not found a game that's grabbed me the same. I know League isn't an MMO, I'm not saying it is. But then, I played a lot of New World when that first came out, and then slowly dropped off at the end. Eve has been something that's always interested me, but I've never dipped my toe in. Or I think I dipped my toe in like 5 years ago, and it was just so convoluted I couldn't get my head around it at the time. But last couple of years, been playing some classic WoW, like hardcore, really enjoying that. And I've been really following Ashes of Creation's development. So that's the kind of MMO that I've been looking to, as something that I love the sound of the vision, and I want to see that achieved, because it sounds like something I would enjoy greatly. But all other things, like I tried Throne of Liberty, tried Lost Ark, played a little bit of both of them, but the pay to win aspects of those games turned me off. So I've struggled to find an MMO that I really want to fall in love with, if that makes sense. But I'm desperate to, because I love the concept.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're certainly trying to find one. You said you played a good bit of New World. You enjoy that one?
Yeah. I think New World had a lot going for it. It kind of fell apart, sadly. And I think a lot of that came down to, as everyone knows, the handling of it when it was released. There were constant issues. They never did the server rollbacks they should have done when the economy just got destroyed. And then, like, I remember it blows my mind still. On launch, they had, I think, 3 OCE servers, 3 Australian Oceanic servers that could hold like 6,000 people total. So day one, there was a queue of like 24,000 people trying to get into just one of the servers.
Yep.
But yeah, I really liked what New World had to offer, but its end game, it just turned into people running as a train through the end game locations, and I wanted that, I guess, that WoW dungeon raiding experience.
Yep.
And I got end game locations where people just ran just trains around them. That's all they did.
I know, it was quite sad. I was in the same boat. I played a lot of New World when it first dropped and the end game. I fell off, and then I came back for one of the patches. You know, they were making some improvements, but they were also making some regressions in other ways. And finally, I just drifted away from it. I still think that over the past, I don't know, 8 years or so, it's probably still the most promising MMO that has come out, and they still managed to just drop the ball on it. But like compared to all the others that have come out in the time, like they've all somehow been worse. So
yeah,
I don't know.
and that's it. Like every time, like Throne Liberty is, I guess, the most recent example I can point to, and I think Chrono Odyssey might be going in a similar direction. But Throne of Liberty, I know it had been released in Korea and then it was coming to the West, and I'd heard nothing of it, so I'd never heard of the game. So when I saw it was coming, I was like, oh, amazing, brand new MMO, all this content, been player tested over in Korea, so you know you're not going to have the bugs that New World had on release as an example. And then I was playing the open weekend, and I'm like, okay, this is getting good. And then I got to the dungeons or whatever they called them in the game. And then I was like, oh, you can pay real money to get into these. Oh, it's a time limit. There's like a daily limit if you can only run one or two. And it's like, and everything implodes. Because I know it had such a big guild space. There was such a big focus on big guilds, getting amongst it, getting into fights with each other. But the moment you introduce pay to win, like, I'm just completely out. I can't and I know that's fairly common. I don't think your audience is probably going to disagree with that necessarily.
No.
But yeah, it just takes it away. Any pay for convenience, I'm so disappointed that that's the way it's gone. Because I play classic WoW now, and I know that's maybe not the best example, but I look at that and I think if I only got into this when I was a kid, you know, when this first came out, because what is it, 20 years old now? So I would have been 12-ish. If I just got into it back then, I would have had the best time in the world. But at 12, I didn't have a credit card, and I wouldn't be able to convince someone to pay for a subscription. So I missed that boat. But I look at that and I'm like, why can't games release now with this same level of polish and quality? And maybe, you know, what it looks like now isn't exactly what it looked like back then. But I just look at it and I'm like, how do we get what we receive today when this was possible?
I'm with you. I talk about it, you know, my family, my friends, my community all the time. And it's like way back then. I mean, just the sheer scope of WoW's launch was truly staggering if you compare it to the games coming out. Like when New World launched, it had, I don't know, maybe 4 dungeons as you progressed up through to max level, and then you've got the max level, and there was 2.
Yeah, and looking back at them, they were decent, but they weren't that complex at the same time. Like it was a small environment. Now I'm thinking back to it. It's a small environment, a few enemies lit it in, and then the end game ones are a bit more complex. There's one in particular at the start I'm thinking of. But yeah, it's exactly that. Like there's, and I'll be honest, I've largely played just hardcore classic WoW, and I've never made it to 60.
Okay.
But that's because that's part of the enjoyment I get out of the game. So I should say I'm completely bastardizing that as an MMO experience. But it blows my mind the sheer amount of just content. You know, in New World, I had the whole thing where there was a city in one space of the map, and then the other space of the map, it was the same city just flipped. It was all that kind of stuff. But then you look at WoW, and it's like every race, all these races have different starting locations, all have their own unique city. It's incredible architecture for the time. You know, it looks funny now, but for the time, incredible amount of effort that went into designing it. And then we get today's devs who are just, copy paste that, flip it around, and people won't pick it up.
I know.
If they've never existed on the internet.
I know. Even WoW does that now. Like WoW has fallen from its former graces. I think. Like if you look at retail WoW now, like every expansion comes out, they introduce a new city. It's shared between the Horde and Alliance, which kind of diminishes that whole faction warfare thing we had going on in the beginning. It's like now we just all hang out together, and then and the copy paste that you're talking about. I was just playing a little bit of Mr. Pandaria because Mr. Pandaria Classic launched, and I dipped my toes into it. You know, we got a guild out there, and I was like, okay, I'll come and check it out. And as I was going from like one quest hub to another, I just noticed all these inns are the same. They just keep rotating. So exactly what you're pointing at, but
that's it. Yep.
That's funny. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now there's some I missed, so I don't know. I only played a little bit of Final Fantasy, so I can't really comment on that. And I completely missed Guild Wars 2. I hear that's
I love Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars, and I know we've got the question coming up about PvP and stuff, so I might just dive straight in. Guild Wars 2 was the first MMO for me where PvP like kind of clicked, and I was like, this is awesome, because they had really large scale PvP wars. I remember being on, and this is so long ago now, it's my mind is struggling a bit. I remember just being on like some castle wall and just seeing all these players on this wall I'm coming up to it. So I'm coming up to the wall from behind, and I see all these players on top, and I'm like, incredible. They must be waiting to go on an assault or something. So I climb up to the top of this wall. I'm there with all these players. I look over the wall, and it's just a sea. There's just a sea of people. And that for me was just like, this is incredible. Like, this is the experience I want in gaming. And that's what I've been chasing the whole time, and chasing that kind of MMO dragon. Like, that is what I want in a game. But it's got to be an incredibly hard thing to get right. And so many games just don't get it right. They just don't quite land into that same kind of grandiose space. And I know it takes a lot of infrastructure to get those things right as well, but it's just every time I think back to that as my kind of core PvP memory of like, and I was a drop in the bucket for sure, but it felt so incredible just to be surrounded by these people.
Yeah. I mean, I've been chasing it my whole life. I started with Ultima Online. I've been playing just one MMO after another, and I keep looking for the next good one. What excites you about Ashes? Is there anything that really stands out?
It's a similar kind of thing, large scale, kind of like PvP, PvE interactions as well. Not necessarily just PvE, but and I'm coming to the terms with the lingo. It's the sand park style of MMO versus the theme park, right? So as I understand, Ashes is creating a really good sandbox, and I love the concept of that. I like the idea of their nodes. I like the idea of their nodes kind of contributing to the world, and I think they're a bit ambitious in saying it'll like shift some of the things that happens in those locations. I think that might be pushing a bit high, but let them shoot for the stars.
Yeah.
I love that idea, and I like that mixed with their corruption mechanics. There's that always PvP on. I'm not saying I think that's 100% going to land. I'm not saying that game is going to necessarily be successful, but I love the vision of it. I love the vision of I could just be walking down the road and some guy decides to fight me. It's a risk to him, so he's not necessarily griefing me, because that's what they're trying to combat, right? Is the griefing. That's the big issue there. I love the idea that somebody can just come up and have that, and that can be in an interaction you have occasionally with someone. And then you can go to those larger scale PvP battles and actually engage in that. And then there's caravan system where you have to actually support people getting things from one place to another. But I can completely see that system toppling over if it's not properly held up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you just been kind of casually watching the progress, or have you jumped into any of the alphas?
No, I've been jumping into the alpha. I didn't play a lot during the most recent alpha. Was Alpha 2 Phase 2. I plan to be jumping into a lot more of Phase 3, because Phase 2 was only up 5 days a week, and the 2 days. Sorry, I'll try to limit my swearing. I do swear a fair bit being Australian.
That's fine.
Good to know. The 2 days it was down to like the 2 peak days I could have really sunk time in. So I'm waiting for Phase 3. They're a bit more further along, but I'm really liking it. I think it plays well for its alpha stage, obviously. I have been following most of all of the monthly updates for like the last maybe 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it's wait and see is my opinion on most of those things. Is there anything you're looking forward to? Like, is there a particular game that you're looking at and thinking this is going to achieve the MMO dream?
I've been watching 3 games for a couple years now on all of them. One is Ashes of Creation. I do have high hopes for that. I think the things that Steven has outlined, like they resonate with me. I really like the effort they're putting into scaling the Unreal 5 engine, because they're tackling some of the parts of it that make that kind of game really challenging. I know that is extremely difficult work they're doing. I'm excited to see it. I'm rooting for them. I want it to succeed. I also have been jumping into the alphas. I feel like the combat feels really good. It's fluid. I just enjoy fighting in that game. Which is the most important thing to me in a game. That's why I liked World of Warcraft back in the day. Like, the combat felt good. Contrasted with some other games I played where it just felt kind of like dull. But so, yeah, and of course, the large scale sandbox. I also favor the sandbox model over the content drip vertical progression theme park model. What excites me is being able to make my mark on the world. So Ashes definitely has some things going for it that feels like it's going to make that possible. Another game I've been tracking is PAX Day. I don't know if you've looked at that one at all.
I've not. I've seen drips and drabs. I wouldn't be able to speak to it in any confidence. But it's worth looking into, you'd say?
Yeah, it's worth checking out. It's actually, you mentioned that you had tried poking your head into EVE Online once or twice.
No,
Some of the ex EVE Online developers are building PAX Day.
Oh, okay, so good pedigree then.
Yeah, so they're drawing a lot of, you can, if you really dig into how the systems in PAX Day work, you can kind of map them to how things worked in EVE Online. So, but this one's sword and sorcery, fantasy setting instead of space, and so they started out with a really complex building system. So it's definitely sandboxy. Players can build anything they want. There's literally like nothing in the world before players enter it. It's just wilderness, and so the players got to come in. They got to build the settlements. They got to build the markets. Like they have to, all that stuff needs built by players. The Achilles heel of that game right now is combat. Like I mentioned, like Ashes of Creation, the combat feels really good to me. PAX Day, the combat does not feel really good. It kind of, you know how like survival games, like the combat always just feels kind of.
It always feels off because everything is there to support the survival aspects, and they throw in combat last minute.
Yeah, that's how PAX Day feels.
Oh, that's brutal. Yeah, because I think that's what turned me off MMOs a little bit in my younger years, my like teens, late teens, early 20s potentially, is good combat in MMOs. Because I was I was a Call of Duty kid. I was, I'll own that. I was a Call of Duty kid, but I played a bit of everything. Loved obviously the Soul series, RPG, classic RPGs like Skyrim, Oblivion, all that kind of stuff. The Witcher games. I'm just kind of naming the big ones, to be honest, but I play literally everything under the sun. I play pretty much everything I can. And MMOs, for me, combat's a big thing. So some MMOs having that kind of floaty combat doesn't quite land well. Also live in Australia, so whether they had oceanic servers at the time was really questionable. I played League for years on North American servers, like 250 ping. And then we didn't get oceanic stuff until, I can't remember, it was like 2011, 2012, somewhere around then. It was like years later. So it was a similar thing for MMOs. And I understand that, not a big enough market. So that was always a bit of a drawback too. Whereas now we're largely seeing most of these developers, push out oceanic servers right away. Thank God. But it was that combat feel. It was that combat feel that kind of kept me off MMOs. But I'm really starting to appreciate it more. And I think it was more so I just didn't fully understand it. Like playing WoW now. Love the combat. There's a bit of that paper scissors rock. There's line of sighting. There's different aspects to it that you can go from being like a novice to like a master, and there's always something to improve on. Yeah. So I agree with you in terms of Ashes of Creation. I think the combat there is really good for the stage it's at. Yeah. Obviously, around the combat, things are really rough, but the combat itself is incredible, and they've got a really good system there so far. So it's disappointing to hear that PAX Day has missed the mark on that one, because it's core to the experience in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that's what I like to do. Like, I would like to support other people who want to build things. I'm not a builder. Like, I don't want to sit there and build a castle, but I'll go out and kill monsters and get stuff that you need for it. Like, that's what I want to do, right? So, and then the last one that I have my eyes on, which is probably the biggest one, that's probably what most people on my channel watch for, is Star Citizen. I got
that's another one I've never fully jumped into. But it's like Eve. It's one that I've seen from the periphery, and I'm always like, I need to sit down and properly look at this someday. Probably jump into it, because I know the memes obviously around it. Is it ever going to get done? All that kind of stuff. How is it? I guess. Sorry, this is probably a really basic question. Your audience is going to know. Is it 90% complete? Is it complete, but they're just expanding it? Like, what's the go?
It's I think. If all you've heard is kind of the memes and the jokes around it never being done, I think if a person like that jumps in, I think they'd be surprised at how much is there. Like there is a lot there. I mean, you can spend a considerable amount of time like kind of getting a feel for the game, and the problem is that it's just a bunch of systems and game loops that are all disconnected. Like the backbone of the game is not there yet, which is the economy, crafting, building. That stuff is all planned, and that's the stuff that's missing. So right now, like for example, there's a lot of like Eve parallels. Like you can go out and you can mine asteroids, you can mine planets, you can go out and salvage ships or like wreckages and get materials. You can go do bunker missions like FPS, like Call of Duty style, or you can go fight in space, like spaceship battles. All that stuff is there, but like right now, you just go do that thing. There's no real reason to do it. You just go do it because you want to do it, right? Like it doesn't connect to anything. Like you can't take the stuff that you got from mining and go craft something with it. Like that doesn't exist. All you can do is like sell your rocks to an NPC. Like here you go, and then you get some money,
Nice.
and that's the state of the game right now.
So it's like a bunch of different sandboxes they've not connected.
Yeah, and I mean, the plan is to, but yeah, we're not there yet. And of course, there's a lot of bugs. It's alpha.
Oh yeah,
just like Ashes of Creation.
Yeah,
you gotta really battle through the things that aren't working quite right all the time. Like famous one is elevators, right? Like you wake up in your apartment and you want to get down to the trams, you can go board your spaceship and you go down the elevator and you just fall to the center of the planet and die. Like stuff like that.
Oh, oh yeah, okay. That's pretty rough.
But it's getting better and better as time goes on. I mean, we spend a lot of time playing it successfully. We have a lot of fun with it. So, I think if you're a Call of Duty fan and an MMO fan, like it might be right up your alley someday whenever it's a good
look,
ship.
I love sci-fi too, so it sounds perfectly up my alley. I don't know. There's just so many games, and I think that's what it comes down to, right? Like, there's so many games that release, and I'm always jumping from one to another. Which is questionable for YouTube content for sure. But it's what I love doing. I love video games. I love experiencing all kinds of games. The MMO experience is the one that keeps eluding me.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely one you could afford to wait on too. It'll just get better. I think end of 2026. They're working on an MMO and a single player experience. The single player experience is going to be more like just buying Call of Duty and playing through the campaign. They're calling that Squadron 42. That's supposed to ship at the end of 2026. We'll see.
Okay. Yep. So not creating a game, they've created a different game first.
Yeah, well, they're kind of building them both on the same platform with the same assets. Like everything that you see in the MMO is going to be in the game, so they're just kind of packaging it differently. It's interesting. We'll see how it works out.
Why not?
So speaking of, you were mentioning about like large scale battles in Guild Wars 2 that you were liked, and that was one of the things drawing you into Ashes of Creation. Whenever it comes to playing MMOs, the ones that you've played so far, do you tend to play as a solo player, or do you really like the group aspect, or are you somewhere in the middle?
I'd probably lean more towards solo, but I want to lean the other way.
Yeah.
So I'd say I probably play solo more so out of convenience, might not be the right word because it's probably less convenient in many cases. But it's just in terms of finding a group. Yeah. I've always been more so somebody that just plays games and just plays games. I don't like to do necessarily the social stuff outside of that, or at least I didn't. But I'm coming around to that. And it's funny I say that because Call of Duty days again, I was part of a guild. We had a website where, where I do that stuff and socialize. So it is more so I need to find a game that gets me to that point. Because I play most of them solo or with friends. And then I'll group to do various content. But then that makes it quite difficult at certain points to group to do certain types of content. So I'd like to be more socially inclined, but it's finding, I guess, a game that encourages that. And I think that's why Ashes kind of appeals to me. Because it is that sandbox. You will have to work together. There is like that common goal. Whereas so many MMOs are now, as I understand it anyway, this is more something I've heard, are more keyed towards allowing solo players to get through it. So then if I can get through it, I will. But I much prefer that the game encourage me to group, which I think Ashes does quite well. I think Classic WoW does decently well too, where I'll just be walking through the world doing my quests, doing my thing, and then, there is a hard quest, or somebody says, hey, can somebody help me with this elite or with this quest, or hey, does anyone want to come group and do this? That's the stuff I love, the kind of emergent grouping behavior. I've never been one that's really dived into a guild, but it's, again, something I want to experience, something I want to do, but it's finding a game that's going to grab me enough that I want to commit that time to, hanging out in a Discord after I finish a session, planning for another one. It's finding a game that's going to encourage that.
Interesting. That's a cool perspective that I haven't heard yet. So you are, it sounds like, obviously then you are good with a so there's a constant tug of war on public forums, right? Places like Reddit and game forums and wherever else, where like you'll have one end of the spectrum is the solo player who says, I want everything to be accessible to me. Like why should I be locked out of all these gaming experiences just because I don't want to make friends, or I don't want to invest in the community, or I've had bad experiences? And then you have the other side, which is, the large groups of players who do have existing communities and they do have existing guilds, and they're coming in as a large group of people, and they're like, we want there to be challenges that challenge our group. Like we want those group mechanics and reasons to come together and do things. So it sounds like you're kind of right there in the middle. Like you tend to play by yourself, but you want the game to kind of coerce you into grouping.
Yeah, I'd say I'm in the middle, but I'd say I'm leaning more towards the group stuff. Yeah. I want the game to have content that I can solo, and I think it's important that a game have content you can solo at various levels, purely so that, you know, if I don't know, you've had a bad raid, you've had a bad day, but you want to grind a little bit, so you can jump on, do something yourself. But I do think that I'm fine with there being content that is locked behind groups. So again, I think about dungeons in WoW. You need to be part of a group to do those, or raids, obviously, at a higher level. And that's the same kind of stuff I want to see in Ashes as well. And there is that stuff where there are certain locations where you don't want to go without a group because you're not going to be able to get through the stuff. Yeah. I think that's good because it encourages. I think it's good to encourage the group play, but allow the solo play. But there should always be a ceiling to solo, and then group should be above that. Yeah. Where it's like, yep, this is how much you can do solo. And then if you want to do the pinnacle stuff, you really need to be grouping. And as long as the game makes it easy to group, you know, obviously that's kind of a key part of it. Because I think back to Destiny 1 when that released, and I remember you couldn't group, or you couldn't do like a group finder for the raids or the dungeons, whatever they called them at the time. And I remember that being a frustration because I was, again, playing on console, and it was a bit of a nightmare to try and coordinate with people because you're doing individual messages via PSN, or you're obviously finding an outside source. So if the game offers that and it allows you to group, that's good. I don't necessarily say a group finder is a must-have because I know that can be rough, especially for intricate like dungeons and raids. Obviously, I've never done like an endgame World of Warcraft raid, but I'm aware those are quite intensive and you need a lot of coordination. So I can understand why you wouldn't want a group finder for that. But I think I prefer it. I guess I come back to the simple fact of MMOs aren't for everyone, and that's okay. You can have some that give you some solo content, but if players want content that is specifically for groups, they should have that. And I think that's where I like Ashes. You know, they've got a vision. They've got a vision they're sticking to. Whereas I think a game like WoW, as I understand it, has become more solo friendly over time. So you've kind of shifted your player base from being group to now heavily solo. I think it's fine for both to exist, but I think MMOs should be for groups. They're massively multiplayer online games, for God's sake. They should maybe be focused on groups more than necessarily allowing every player to solo everything, because then what's the point of the MMO? You're just playing an RPG at that point.
Oh, speaking of the choir here, I totally agree. I think retail WoW, especially, the few times I've kind of jumped into it in years past, it really feels like a lobby game to me now. Like everybody just hangs out in the main city and they just click buttons and they're thrown into an activity. And the most recent version of WoW even has like single player dungeons now. You can just go through all by yourself.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. See, I'm not a big fan of that because it's kind of like, why am I playing WoW? I could just be playing Dark Souls or Skyrim, depending on how hard I want the game to be necessarily. Yeah. But I'm also, when I talk about group finders, something I love about classic WoW, and I love about Ashes as well, is and this is such a weird thing that some people love, some people hate. I like that you actually have to walk somewhere. Yeah. Or you have to use some form of method of transport in the game, whether it's a warlock summoning or it's, you know, what it might be, a teleportation. I like the travel being part of the game. I'm not a big fan of, and I can't remember which MMO I played that did this, but did exactly what you said, where you sit in a group or you're sitting in a city, you've queued in, and then at a certain point you just disappear into the dungeon, and then there you are. I'm not a big fan of that. It doesn't make me feel connected to the world. It doesn't make the world feel lived in. It just turns the city into a lobby instead of somewhere you travel to and then need to go from place to place. And I guess that's, again, the theme park versus the sandbox almost. You know, I really like that sandbox aesthetic of, if this world is what it is, make me travel it. Make me move through it. If it's a series of lobbies, just give me a series of lobbies. Because at a certain point, once you can fast travel, you don't see anything because you don't bother doing the rest of it. You know, you just fast travel. And then that limits, thinking about Ashes, that limits your open world PvP options. It limits everything, because then you're not going to be ganking people on the road because they're just teleporting from hub to hub to hub. That's all they're doing. So I really want us to get back to that. But there's so many, can't think of the word I'm looking for here necessarily. There's so many different speed bumps, I suppose, that the community is going to hit along the way. Some people aren't going to like traveling, and the devs are going to hear about that. Some people are going to like fast traveling, and the devs are going to hear about that. So then they look at those 2 points and they think, okay, fast travel it is. And that's my worry is you get a small minority of your community. I mean, everyone knows this, saying these things, putting up these speed bumps, and then the devs just pull further and further and further back until you have what I understand to be retail WoW, as somebody that's not played it. Yeah. Where it's taken out all of the struggle, all of the harshness that players need to deal with, and then you just get a simple soup at that point, and either you love the simple soup or you don't. It's not complex.
What you're saying is music to my ears. I could not. And same thing with New World. I mean, eventually people were complaining about travel in New World. I don't know if you played long enough to see it, and they scattered those teleportation shrines like everywhere. And it was right around the same time they introduced mounts, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, why did you just introduce mounts whenever you just
because they contradict
teleporting?
Yeah, I was still playing at that time. I think that was probably around the time I ended up dropping off, to be honest with you. Because I didn't really like it. You could teleport to towns so freely. There was a cost to it, so it didn't turn me off entirely. Mm-hmm. But it became, teleport to this town, walk to that location, walk back to that town, teleport to this town, walk to that location. And I just hate that. I hate it so much. Yeah. And that I think is again why Ashes appeals to me. You're going to have kind of your node, and that's where you're going to spend a lot of your time. And then, if you want to go somewhere, you have to actually plan it out. And it must have been one of their recent dev talks. So I'm just parroting back what they said here. But they talked about you need to make travel a thing so that big guild or like smaller guild skirmishes occur. Because if let's say I'm a giant streamer, I log on, my guild are going to go do something. Instantly, the entire server knows what's happening. Instantly, everyone can teleport to my location. Instantly, I'm having a bad time because everyone knows what my guild is doing. Whereas if I say, hey guys, we're moving this caravan from here to here today, and then the other guild that wants to challenge that is on the other side of the continent, well, it's going to take them like half an hour, if not longer, to actually mobilize and start moving and coordinate. Whereas if you can teleport, that's instant. So teleportation removes so many options, and I don't think a lot of players especially understand that. When you give this convenience, you're removing so many aspects of really interesting emergent player behavior. And as soon as you've lost that stuff, you can't, because the biggest problem with these systems is once you've implemented it, you cannot remove it. And that's my biggest concern with Ashes, is if they start to cave to player wants, they're going to lose out on these things. Because think about New World. If they remove teleportation in New World, the player base would riot. Yeah. They'd hate it. They'd hate it. And that's the same in most games. If you remove a quality of life feature, it's much easier to hold off on implementing quality of life than it is to remove it, is always my view. So I'm always hesitant for that to go into games early. That needs to be the last thing you put on once you've tested that stuff. Because you put it in at the start, you've committed to it at that point. You've committed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've seen it. I just watched a video. I did a reaction to like the lead dev over at World of Warcraft, who had started out elitist jerks, and then he got hired by Blizzard, and now he's kind of running the show over there. And he said exactly, they've had some regrets because they've given like quality of life things that they can no longer take back. Like once the cat's out of the bag, like it's gone. You can't do anything about it. So that tracks with what you're saying.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Yeah.
And I the music to my ears bit was like the travel being part of the experience. Like I cannot agree more. That's one of the things I didn't even think to mention it. Like Ashes of Creation, PAX Day, and Star Citizen all have that.
Good. I'm now 10 times more interested in all of them.
Yeah,
because I'm playing classic WoW at the moment with a couple of mates. We're just messing around, seeing how far we can get. Like our challenge is, we're not playing it like an MMO. We're playing it to see if we can get to 60 just to get to 60 with zero game knowledge, which is proving quite troublesome as you'd expect. But every time we're just walking around, it's time for us to just chat, time for us to talk about what we're planning on. You need that breathing room. And I was playing the Battlefield 6 beta this weekend, and a lot of they've seen criticism and praise both ways, and this is not necessarily a topic for now, but a lot of the criticism I see is it doesn't let you breathe. Actually having to move between locations gives you time to breathe. Yeah. It gives you time to kind of decompress, think about the world, engage in the world a bit more, think about what you're planning to do. instead of just, you know, dopamine hit, dopamine hit, dopamine hit. You're just running from point to point to point to you're killing this mob, you're killing that mob, teleporting over there to a dungeon. You need that space. You need space. You need to give players space, but it's so counterintuitive to what we know of gaming, where it's like you need to be entertained constantly. You need to keep people glued to their seats. You need to give them a battle pass, and you need to make sure the timing queue is low. You got to be pushing them so they don't leave your game. And I think the entire industry has just become wired to think that players need like the TikTok reel where you're just scrolling and you're looking at something new every 10 seconds so you don't get bored. But no, I'm happy to spend some time moving somewhere. I am like we can be patient, but when they don't respect that patience, what are they respecting?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, another reason like retail WoW doesn't sit well with me. If you go into a dungeon in retail WoW, I mean, it is just kind of a light show. It's it's like just a bombardment of stimulation against your brain because like everybody moves so fast. They've introduced like every character class now has like fast movement capabilities, so you can literally fly from one pack to the other. It's just a constant stream of pulling and blending stuff down and like all these light shows.
Meaning.
Yeah. Whereas like if you compare it to classic, you said you haven't gotten to 60 yet, but you go into a place like BRD. It's just enormous. I mean, miles and miles of like old caverns to walk through, and there's distance between the packs, and you kind of, well, back in the day at least, that's a little bit less true now, but like you kind of have to plan each pull, right? It require a little communication, like, oh, we're gonna CC this one, and we're gonna pull this, we're gonna attack skull first, and so like that, just the act of moving from pack to pack and planning the pulls. It was that downtime that you're talking about. That's I agree.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be intensive. And I can't remember the name of the mission or exactly where it was, but we were doing just an elite quest the other day, me and two friends. So it's just the three of us.
Yeah.
Fighting all these elites, and got into the final room because we've got to kill this elite boss, get his head, blah blah blah. And we get there, we can see, I think there's him, two other guys, and a small dragon pet or something like that. There's three of us, and it's looking a bit dodgy. So we talked about that. I was like, okay, I'm going to fear this gladiator. We're going to focus down the dragon pet. We're then going to focus down this guy. And then we executed it, and it worked, and it felt it felt awesome. It just felt amazing. And we talked about that for the rest of the week. Like, oh, how fun was that? Because it was a challenging space. It was just the three of us. And again, a lot of people look at WoW Classics combat and say, oh, you know, it's kind of whatever. You know, you sit there, cast a spell, you cast the occasional CC. But I had to time my fears on that guy, because if I hadn't been timing my fears, we would have been completely wiped. And they started respawning at the door, so we would have been screwed on the way out, which we didn't know at the time. Same with my mate. If he wasn't pulling the correct aggro, like we were all doing certain things, and it doesn't need to be overly complex. It doesn't need to be overly flashy. Those are a few trash mobs in a random castle which, to be fair, I think I had seen in other places had been copy pasted, but it was a few trash mobs, and it was still a highlight of our experience. And it's one of those gaming memories I'm now going to keep for a long time. And I think about that for a few other MMOs as well. Again, New World as well. I remember me and a couple of friends, like really early on, had taken on some named enemy. And we had to coordinate a little bit, but it wasn't the same type of coordination. It wasn't as in-depth. But it was the same kind of core memory. And it wasn't even a dungeon. It wasn't even a raid. This was just a random space in the world where we actually had to coordinate as a team. And that's what sticks with me. It's not the flashy stuff. It's not anything special. Those aren't the things that kind of give you those memories and give you those, like, you know what I mean when I talk about like core memories in gaming, right? Like, I'm sure you've got tons of them where you and your friends overcame some massive thing, or you and your guild or whatever it might be. I've like a bunch because I play a little bit of Escape from Tarkov. I have a bunch from Tarkov because it's a bit of a high intensity game, but it's not, oh, this guy had a big kit, I had a big kit. It was, oh, I had a Mosin, and if you've played the game, it'll make sense. You know, I had this shitty gun, and this other guy had like a beefy thing, but I was able to take him out and then flank someone else. And it's about the experience. It's not necessarily about how neat the package is for that experience.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. You mentioned a few times PvP. You mentioned it a few times now. You mentioned about being a reason to have these journeys and being out in the world and traveling. You mentioned it in Guild Wars 2. You played Escape from Tarkov. Yep. Sounds like you're no stranger to PvP. Is that right?
Yeah, I do love some PvP. I mean, multiplayer games to me are kind of what I aim for, because what I look for in games is I look for a challenge. So I love the Souls games for that, because it's a challenge against me. It's me versus the machine. But it's harder to get a better challenge than you versus another player, right? Because they're going to do things that are unexpected to a degree until the meta sets in. They're going to do things that are a bit different to a PC. Whereas when you're versing an AI, you always find ways of cheesing it, right? Like you just, it's the human condition. You will find a way to cheese that AI. So I love PvP. I mean, I the problem with PvP, and especially in MMOs, is griefing, I suppose. Like I think about a lot of the MMOs I've played, and so much of the PvP has come down to people griefing. Although my experience there is thin, I will say. But like I think back to RuneScape as like my earliest example, and it's just a lot of people trying to bait you into the wilderness. I think it was called, just trying to bait you out there. I remember my very first experience with PvP was some guy being like, "Hey, come out here, and we'll do this together." And I remember being like, "Yeah, okay, let's see how that goes." Like 2 feet in, he starts attacking me, so I just ran away. But it's trying to escape the griefing, so it's trying to find meaningful PvP, and I think that's why Ashes appeals to me, because I like the idea of the corruption system. Whether it's going to land, not sure in the end, but I like the idea that, if I see you pick up something rare and I'm with you, I can have that moment and think, oh shit, can I take Grolo here? Can I take him? Do you reckon I can take him down and run off with that? But also knowing there's a risk there to me, because I think the biggest issue with a lot of games, and this might be MMOs, you can tell me if I'm wrong, is that PvP doesn't always have a risk reward, or there's no downside to griefing people. And when you don't have a downside for griefing, people will grief because they get bored. They're annoyed. They've had a bad day at work, and they go see some guy that's 10 levels below them, and they think, you know what, I'm going to take it out on that guy. I mean, people do it naturally anyway outside of games. Of course, it's going to be 10 times worse in games with the anonymity. Yeah. So that's in terms of my experience, is limited. Again, it's RuneScape. A little bit in New World, but that was the instance combat rather than because again, there was no, and I think what I'm coming around to, my point here, is there needs to be a purpose to it. There needs to be a point to it. Because I never felt there was a point to flagging in New World just between settlements. When you're just out in the open world. Because from what I can remember, you could flag and then you could fight other people if they were flagged.
Yeah.
But I never saw the purpose, so I never engaged in it. And I think that's been my biggest issue with a lot of MMOs is unless there's a real purpose for the PvP, I won't necessarily engage in it.
Yeah.
So I'll do it around events. If you can do it in the open world, I would do it like I mentioned there in Ashes of Creation if there is an example or a time where I'd want to do it. And I'm okay with that kind of behavior. Same with like their caravan or their new crate system, things like that. I think that's good at incentivizing PvP. And I think their corruption system ensures that there's a risk to that. Because if there's no risk, then you're just letting players do it freely. It's something that I don't know the answer to. I think it's incredibly hard to balance. What are your, like, am I getting it wrong? Like, I'm curious from someone who's played a lot of MMOs, and maybe something like Star Citizen would help me understand that a bit better. Like, what's your thought on PvP and MMOs?
Star Citizen suffers the same problem as a lot of others right now, and I think you're hitting one of the big core issues, and that is risk imbalance is what I call it, where the defender bears all of the risk and the attacker bears none, because the aggressor is usually in a position where they're going in with they're either going with a plan to minimize their losses, or the game doesn't even have a way of penalizing them if things don't go wrong. Like you're familiar with Ashes. I'll talk about that first, but like I do think the corruption system is a good stab at solving this because, like you mentioned, if I want to go red and attack somebody, like I'm risking my own gear. Like if something backfires and I die, I'm going to be dropping my own stuff, and I think that could be a good solution. I don't know. Again, with you, I don't know if it's going to work out in the end, but one place where I think Ashes is not doing well right now is the caravan system, because the defender who's going to be running the caravan, they have to invest their glint. They have to go out and they've got to buy a caravan and potentially upgrade it and put resources into it. And then they got to load this thing up and they got to slowly traverse the world. And you don't have to engage the corruption system to attack that caravan. So I find imbalance there is that there's really no reason for an attacker not to attack your caravan, right? And if you kill them, well, they just respawn at the local graveyard and they come back and they start attacking you again. Like there's no real way to repel them. Now, I understand that it's alpha. They're still going to be iterating on systems. Eventually, they may have systems in place to do that. But I find that a problem in all games. Star Citizen has the same thing right now. Like because it's alpha. Like I mentioned, the backbone, the economy's not there. There's really no penalties. So like if a trader is loading up a ship full of valuables on a pad somewhere, there's nothing to stop players from coming in, and they dive bomb. They like kamikaze into you. You blow everything of yours up. They lose theirs too, but they don't care. They're just gonna respawn, right? So same thing.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, you've nailed it there, and I think in a lot of ways that might be what's kind of kept me away from MMOs. Is what is the purpose of this? Like you said, the risk imbalance. Because yeah, you play a game like Battlefield. My risk is the same as your risk. I die, I respawn, and I lose the ticket for my team, whatever it might be. Yeah. It's whatever. There's no real individual risk there, but that's not the point of those games. Whereas in MMO, like, yeah, it doesn't, like, it feels terrible. Like when somebody 10 levels above you runs by and you have that moment of, and oh, yep, they're attacking me. Okay, all right. And at certain points, there's nothing you can do about it. It sounds like loading resources where you're on the landing pad and then some guy's dive bombing you. Just here it comes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel great for anyone. Might feel great for the attacker for a moment there. They might be having a bit of a laugh out of it. But it's what slowly kind of kills the game over time, because you lose people to, they want good PvP. They don't get it. They kind of start to fall off. I don't know what the solution is. What you raised there about the caravans in Ashes is a good point, though. Like, there is no downside to attacking a caravan. You're putting all the risk on the defender, and it is such a hard system to balance. Like we both said, they're taking a stab with corruption. I like the idea. Mm-hmm. Whether it's going to actually work in implementation is another thing entirely, especially around all the other game systems. But I like that they're at least trying.
Yeah,
I'm so tired of a lot of game devs just not.
Yeah,
I suppose, and just throwing in systems that we've seen don't work, or teeing people up to be griefed in many ways at the same time. It's really complex and that's again what draws me to Ashes is the PvPvX, whatever they call it, where you do have that aspect at all times. Because I want that emergent gameplay. It makes the world feel lived in. I come back to the idea of moving between settlements, actually physically moving. It makes the world feel lived in, because it makes the world feel lived in if somebody can just walk up and attack me. Because then I'm actually living in a world instead of just in my own protective bubble, worried about the computers that I see in the distance, who I know how their behavior is. I know what they do. I don't need to worry about them. I want a game that makes me look at somebody walking down the road and think, is that guy going to try something, or are we just going to walk by? It's like what I imagine medieval times were like, where it's, you've got no cameras, you've got no phones, you've got nobody around for hundreds of miles, and you just see somebody and you're like, God, I hope they're going to be friendly.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you are firmly in the camp that PvE and PvP can and should coexist. You wouldn't want to see them split.
No, I want to see them coexist, and I would say most players probably want to see them coexist in a perfect world. Because in a perfect world, they coexist in a way that it's emergent. If I'm just walking down the road, it's unlikely somebody's just going to come up and attack me. It wouldn't be in their best interest to do that, just like it is in society, right? You're walking down the road. It's not in somebody's best interest to just come up and wallop you over the head. But they could. They shouldn't, but they could, right? Like, that's the world we live in. I want to experience that in a game too, except obviously the consequences are less dire. You're probably not going to end up in a hospital or in prison. But there needs to be that consequence to keep it interesting. I somewhat understand and respect of developers that separate them. And I think about New World, in which case, you have the instance PvP events, and then you can flag if you want to, and then you're safe the rest of the time. I understand that because it's simpler, it's easy to set the boundaries around it, but it does remove something from the world. And that's what I want to experience. And that's why, I'm so gung-ho on Ashes and so huffing the copium, as they say, for that game, because I'm so excited to see if that concept works. Because if it does, it'll be fantastic. It'll be mind-blowing.
Yeah. I have hope as well, and I think these games can get it right, or at least very, very close enough.
Me too. Yeah.
I looked at, we have some inspiration. EVE Online, I was talking about this previously in this series, but EVE Online has been around for over 20 years now. It's older than WoW, I think. And
Jesus.
It's one big open world PvP. You can PvP people anywhere in that game. But they do have, if you've never played it, they have low sec, high sec, and all sec.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, so and what that means is it's kind of like the wilderness in RuneScape, right? Like, there's areas where you're on your own completely. Good luck. And there's areas where hey, if somebody messes with you, we're going to defend you. So they have like NPCs that'll show up and just obliterate the person that attacked you. That's high security. And so you end up in a place where, you know, you have people flying these huge barges full of valuables through multiple systems and nobody bothers them. They could go suicide gank them, but the penalties are high enough. They're like, they got to run the equations in their head, right? They got to be like, well,
yeah,
I could take him out, but I'm going to lose the ship I'm flying. And in order to get a ship that is able to take him out, that's going to cost me some. So is it worth it? You know, people doing that calculus seems to work.
Yeah, and that's what I want. I think that's what every player wants, realistically, because, well, not every player, but, you know, most players. You want that risk reward. You need there to be that risk reward. You do, because then you know when they're attacking you, they are risking something. And then there is an opportunity there for you to actually have an outcome. Because in many cases, the PvP is, you know, somebody aggresses on you, they're not risking anything. You either get away or you don't. So your options are you leave in exactly the same state as when you entered, and minus any damage, or you lose whatever that is. You might lose everything, you might lose part of your stuff. You need that third option where it's, okay, I can either escape with what I have, I can lose everything, or I can actually beat this guy and potentially take stuff from him.
Yeah.
Or I know that if he screws me, he is then flagged and people can take stuff from him. So you know there's at least a risk to that guy. Because in the rock, paper, scissors, you can only draw or lose, is what a lot of PvP feels like. There needs to be the third option of, well, actually, I can win. In this case, winning would just be somebody else wins, or you win if you can take their stuff. But there needs to be that third option. And so many MMOs just give you the two, where it's a draw or you successfully escape. That's it. There's no real winning for you there.
Yeah. I'm with you when it came to New World. I don't even remember what the purpose of flagging was. I think you got some kind of a bonus or something if you flagged.
Yeah, I think you got a very slight bonus to, was it like I can't remember. Yeah, you got a very slight bonus to very something very specific, and it never felt worthwhile. I think I flagged once, walked out and got ganked by two guys who were coming the other direction. I was like, yeah, I don't need to do that anymore. It didn't benefit me in any way. It didn't really benefit them. Like, there was just kind of nothing to it. And that's even worse than a system. Well, it's probably not worse than one that's one-sided. But when there's just no purpose to it, like, I never saw anyone flagged. I could probably count the amount of times I saw people flagged on both hands. Like, realistically, it was just, you'd be walking around and be like, oh, there's one. That's like the actual unicorn. It was like, there's a guy that's flagged. He's looking for PvP. There's nothing going on, but he's looking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And Retail WoW went that way too. They, they used to have PvP servers and PvE servers, but if you go to Retail now, it's just one server kind, and then they have what's called War Mode, where you can opt into War Mode, and it's basically like flagging a New World. It's just, they use phasing in that game, so like they just have all the people who are opted into War Mode in their own phase, and they can, but nobody's in War Mode. If you opt into War Mode, you get the whole place to yourself, pretty much.
Interesting. That's an odd. That's not the worst way of doing it, I suppose, with the layer system.
Yeah.
I guess it is almost like having a server, except it's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I'd be curious how many players like that concept, the flagging on and off. I think it sounds good when you talk about it on a forum.
Yeah.
And in a forum discussion, it sounds great. Yeah, everyone gets to choose if they're in or out. But then you end up in a situation where 99% of players are out.
Yep.
And then maybe they flag once in a blue moon because they want to do a little bit of fighting, but they're not risking anything in that case. They're purely just flagging on because they want to do a bit of PvP. They want to practice, they want to test, but they're not doing it for any reason that has any impact on other players in the game world. And when I talk about impact, I mean like transition of my goods to you or your goods to me. There's none of that. It's just a couple of guys outside having a fist fight outside a bar.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, they're both going to get up and walk away, or one of them is going to respawn. There's going to be no outcome to anything. And I prefer a world, and it's low impact to me going and farming some mobs, but at least I'm having an impact on the world. Somebody else might walk by and there's no mobs there, or I'm inflating the price for some specific drop type. When it's just nothingness, what's the point? And then nobody does it.
Yeah. A lot of times on forums you'll hear the fact that I just called out that things like War Mode have basically no participation. A lot of times on forums you'll see that cited as a reason that games should just
Oh,
be PvE, because obviously nobody wants to PvP. I think that's kind of flawed myself.
yeah.
I think that it's along the same lines of like players saying like we were talking about in the beginning, where everybody will push for quality of life improvements, right? Like I want to get here faster, I want to do that faster. I don't want that. I don't want to have to carry arrows in my bag. I don't want to. You know, people will seemingly, and this is one of the things that the Blizzard dev was talking about was pay paths and introduce quality of life things, not being able to take them back. But at the end of the day, it was all about like, as players, we will try to smooth out the experience to the point that it's no longer fun to play, right?
Yeah. Like if you give players the opportunity, they will turn any shape into a ball because they will smooth every single edge. They will make it so streamlined that they can just roll it down the hill.
Yeah.
You know, you give someone the task of rolling a triangle down a hill, and if you give them the chance, they will just turn it into a ball. Like that's just what they're going to do because they think that's a good idea in the time. But it turns out that's not the game. You've let them, and that's the problem with Blizzard is they've let players dictate what the game should be. They've let players change what the game should be. And it's like when you mix a bunch of like when you're in primary school mixing paints, everything just ends up brown if you put them together. That's the problem. If you let people just continue to mix and do different things, they're going to end up with the color brown. That's what they're going to do every single time. You just end up with the same just soup of nonsense. You need to put boundaries in place and you need to respect those boundaries. And again, I hate to harp on about Ashes, but that's what they're doing. They've got their vision, they're sticking to it. Yeah. And then you've got companies like Blizzard who have listened to the players a bit too much. And now what do they do? What do they do, honestly? How do they fix it without a complete and utter reset? At that point, just make another game. But what do they do without resetting it? And that's the same thing with New World. What do they do? Once they've introduced those features, you know, I know from what I understand of development, New World was supposed to be heavily PvP focused, and then they got a lot of feedback through the tests, and then they slowly took those things out, and then they released in the state they did, which was a bit of a mess. But you can tell that they were going to rely on that kind of sandbox experience, but instead they tried to suddenly make a sandbox a theme park.
Yep.
And it didn't really land. And I think about the fact that where I live in Perth, Western Australia, we have a single like theme park, I guess. It's called Adventure World. Very, very impressive name. And that's all I'd experienced growing up, right? So I was really used to that. And I was like, this is great. I love Adventure World. And then I went to the UK and I went to a proper like theme park. And it was like, oh, because my family's from the UK. I was like, oh, this is what these are supposed to be. And now I can't even look at Adventure World because it's got like it's got like 2 different roller coasters, a few water slides, and a couple of different things. And then I go somewhere else and they have like 30 plus rides, right? That's what I look at with these. We've let the player base boil WoW down to a really just basic experience. But it used to be so much more. But nobody can really see past that because they're so focused on what it is now.
Yeah. I think good point you raised. Where do they go from here? I think they need WoW 2. I don't think it's savable at this point. And
but I don't think they're going to let that cash cow die.
No, definitely not. They're going to run that forever, probably. But
yeah.
And New World too. I agree. I was in the New World beta, alpha, whatever it was. Whenever it still was a sandbox, and so when it shipped, I was just completely caught off guard. I'm like, wow, that's an example of design by committee if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, and it's a sad part of the industry now that it's always a push to get it out instead of a push to get it right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, because I might be jumping ahead on one of our topics here.
Go ahead.
But I think that's what's contributed to the decline of MMOs. And I would argue it's not necessarily just MMOs. I would say it's games in general. But you get people in their camps, you know, who have their views on those specific games. And I think some games are flourishing and some, you know, genres are emerging. But I think for MMOs in particular, they used to be made by people who were incredibly dedicated to a vision and incredibly dedicated to the job. So it was more of I'm not saying it was always a hobby because I'm sure the people working on WoW are actually doing a job. But I think for a lot of them, it was something they did out of passion. So many of those old games were made because those people wanted to make an MMO and they wanted to make their mark. Whereas now, I think most MMOs are made because, hey, have you seen how well WoW's doing? Those people are going for 20 years and people are still subscribing to that. let's make an MMO. Let's get subscribers. I think you have a lot of people going into it now saying, I want to make an MMO because I want to make that. Or we saw it with Battle Royales, right? Fortnite became huge, and then suddenly everybody under the sun, Fallout, for some reason, had a Battle Royale. Everybody had a Battle Royale. And we all know why. It's because they were trying to take some of the market share. But the problem is they didn't put in the effort. None of them put in the work to actually make what they were making good. And they were just trying to follow a formula rather than designing something from the ground up. And I think that's what's happened to MMOs as a result. You've got a bunch of people trying to get into the market, trying to make their mark, but they don't know what they're doing because they're trying to emulate what other people have done rather than actually come to understand the systems that are at play. Which is why I guess things like Star Citizen is actually going somewhere to a degree because they know what they're trying to build. They're just taken quite a while to build it.
Yeah. Which I think that's kind of par for the course these days, just because I think game fidelity has increased to a point where it's just really challenging to build this stuff. I think Throne of Liberty was like 12 years in development. People don't realize how long these games are taking.
Yeah. No, it's that. I mean, I don't know how long the initial like WoW took to build back in the
6
day,
years.
but that's what 6 years. Fuck, 6 years. Okay, there you go. It's at least doubled. But that's what I think for New World, right? Is they had that vision. Coming back to my original thought, they had the vision. They got some feedback, and then instead of taking the time to analyze that feedback, and let's say they changed the game into the theme park it is anyway, take the time to actually flesh out that theme park. It feels like they had a vision up until like 90% of the way through. Then they were like, actually, we're going to quickly tweak 50% of the game and release it on time as we planned.
Yeah.
I know. If you're changing that much of the game, you have to step back and say, okay, well, what is this going to impact? Or now that we're removing PvP as always on and all the player behavior that's going to create, we need to move that somewhere else. But they don't. I feel like so many developers don't do that anymore. And I know a lot of it comes down to like publishers as well. Publishers will push them to release certain things. There's obviously not the stock market, the stakeholders, the shareholders they have to consider. And I just don't think a lot of developers had the similar constraints back in the day.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of financial pressure now. Games are a business rather than kind of a niche hobby that a few geeks engage in. It's now so much of a powerhouse that it's all focused on the money. And I rant about that regularly on my streams. It's just it's kind of ruined the industry. But now we're starting to see people come back. Like Baldur's Gate 3 was an insane success because Larian Studios just self-published most of the thing and put it out themselves, took the time to actually get it complete. And I just don't think we have an industry that will value that type of development process. I don't think we live at a time where anyone is going to let a developer just, like Star Citizen, I guess is maybe the exception, where they've just been working on their game for as long as they have. I don't think we have that level of freedom in the industry anymore to actually let people get that far.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful because back when WoW was built, I mean, the money being generated by the gaming industry was small potatoes, and now it's bigger than Hollywood. So, of course, things are going to change whenever that much money's on the line.
Exactly. They always say follow the money, right? Like they always say follow the money. And we've seen enough of that. Battlefield's another good example. Their last release, 2042, was abysmal, was terrible. Like it was buggy, it was graphically a complete mess, it was lacking basic features. I know there was issue with like it just having a scoreboard or it not having a scoreboard or something at the time. Incredibly basic stuff. And now they're trying to come back with Battlefield 6 and have a bit of a redemption arc. But we should never have had to put up with a redemption arc. And I'm not a big Battlefield guy, but that's just the most recent example I can think of where you just release slop. And a lot of it we will just accept because it's kind of everywhere. But we need to get back to a point of just letting people, it's cliche to say, but let them cook. You've got to let these people actually build these things out because nothing's good half-baked. Nothing is good when you only put half the effort in. But I feel like that's all we see now. I'm going on a bit of a rant there. Apologies, taking us off topic.
No, I think it's a great rant. I've said so many times on this channel that all the flack that Star Citizen receives, and I'm not saying they don't deserve some of it, but people are often comparing it to like what studios like Blizzard, Activision, Rockstar, what these other studios are doing, and I'm like, you can't really. it's so different, and whenever it comes to like criticizing the amount of time it's taking, I think people have to keep in mind that this game could not be built by any AAA studio, like because of exactly what you're talking about. The stakeholders, the shareholders, whatever it is, they're not going to give them the runway to build it. It's too risky. Like you don't. There's no guarantee that the money's going to come back. They're never going to give you that long of a leash. So this was literally the only way to build a game like this. And the same for Ashes of Creation. Ashes of Creation was mostly funded by, Steven, is my understanding. He's got some of his own private investors, but he doesn't have the pressures of like Activision or Microsoft.
Yeah. He doesn't have anyone telling him he's got to release in 2027.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing. And like when I first kind of started my YouTube channel a while back, I made a video on Larian Studios, again, the people who made Baldur's Gate 3, because they've made what is considered by many a pinnacle of RPG gaming. Like it's an incredible game. I'm not sure if you played it yourself.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Oh, it's amazing. It's I introduced my partner to video games because she was never much of a gamer. Unfortunately, I introduced her to like the pinnacle of gaming right at the start. So now she's got high expectations.
Down.
Exactly, and I keep telling her that. But the point is, like, looking at their history, I decided to just look at their history, and they were almost sunk as a studio twice because of publishers. One of their first games, I think, was Divine Divinity. They had to rush it out, and it got like middling reviews. And then they released something pretty decent, and then again they got rushed by a publisher, and it almost sank them. Like they got to the point where I think they had to fire people because they couldn't keep them on. And then they kickstarted Divinity Original Sin and did it all through crowdfunding, and they made a hell of a game. That was their first game that I played of theirs. Then they made Divinity Original Sin 2, crowdfunded it, did incredibly well. Then they had the money to make Baldur's Gate 3. Weren't beholden to publishers, and then look at them thrive. They made 3 incredible games, all because they weren't hemmed in and hamstrung by people saying this is your deadline. That's why I've got faith in Ashes. That's why I've got faith in even a game like Star Citizen, even though I've not played it. Anything coming out of a big publisher these days, I look at it and it's like, I just don't trust. I don't trust that it's going to come out and be complete. I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Been burnt too many times, and I think the industry is starting to understand and see that. But it's disappointing it's taken that long. But I think, coming back to my original point, I think that is ultimately what happened to MMOs. I think you had a bunch of really incredible MMOs come out that were created by incredibly dedicated people who had the time given to them to actually complete the project. Now, you're starting an MMO today, Grolo. You have 5 years to get that thing out. You're going to be 3 years in, and then you're going to realize I'm screwed. I've got to now cut every single corner to get this thing looking like a sphere so I can send it out and players can roll it down the hill. Like that's just where we're at now. That's where we're at. Because nobody wants, and it is, and I understand at the same time, it's probably scary to try and sell a game, going back to the initial discussion, without fast travel. I come to you and say, hey, I'm going to have an MMO. Okay, can I fast travel? No, it's going to take you 2 hours to walk across the world. That's kind of a scary thing to say to somebody that might not fully understand that experience. Yeah. Because you're not going to be walking 24/7. You're not. It's not going to be a walking simulator. But it's trying to get that point across to people that is incredibly hard. And I think everyone at a base level understands it, especially when it applies to a game they enjoy. But trying to tell, an FPS gamer that actually, you know what, walking from city to city in MMO is a good idea. It's probably not going to land immediately. Like, it's an experience you need to have until you actually realize. Like, I think it took me playing classic WoW to fully appreciate how much traversing the world is part of the experience. Sorry.
Yeah. Good points. A lot of insight there. I think that's a pretty good take on what happened to MMOs over the past couple decades. I think quite thought it exactly that way, but.
Yeah, and I neither had I honestly until I saw the question in our chat. But I think it was more so. I think that's happened to all of gaming at the same time, which is why my examples are like RPGs. I think it's just happened to all of gaming, but I think it's hit MMOs particularly hard because they require. And look, I know nothing about game development, but I'm going to assume that throwing together a half-decent first-person shooter is probably a hell of a lot easier than throwing together a half-decent MMO, just because of the amount of competing systems in an MMO. So, of course, they are going to be one of the series hit hardest by that kind of lack of that lack of industry understanding. Because if I need to cut some corners on an FPS, they're probably going to be easier for me to throw in over time. There's limited quality of life, whereas with an MMO, you have to tackle with those big questions. Those really big questions is how much quality of life we're giving people. Thinking about New World, should they be able to have a global bank, or is that going to be tied to a specific city? Like, what's the storage going to look like? Do you want to break the immersion of letting me, grab logs from the other side? Can I just grab logs in the US right now and put them in my backpack because I need them over here in Australia? Can I just do that? Probably not. But in some cases, people are going to say, yes, you should definitely have it. And it comes down to the individual gamer at that point and what kind of experience you're trying to drive, which is why I think having somebody like Steven at the head of Ashes, you need someone with a really consistent vision driving all of that. Because if you have 7 siloed teams, one team's going to say, nah, let them grab resource from wherever they want. We'll make sure our systems over here, we'll make sure our crafting systems are built around the idea that you can get anything anytime you want. And then you may have the gatherable team who are like, we need to make gatherables really scarce. We're going to make sure there's this one mineral you can only get at this one spot at the top of the world. And meanwhile, the crafting station for it's at the bottom of the world. And it's like, what are we doing here? You guys you need someone with a consistent vision who's pulling these ideas together. And I just think we lack that. I think it gets pushed too many times to people who don't understand gaming, people who aren't creative directors in the sense of they understand these things. But I digress.
Well, it was a great digression. One thing that was circling in my head I wanted to follow up with you about was, you've talked about sandboxes a lot. It sounds like you're somebody who's very interested in sandbox gameplay. That was one of the things I was really excited about with New World, because we had a really big publisher that was going to bring out what they were calling an MMO, and they were going to take that angle with it, because for so long it's felt like the theme park approach has dominated MMOs. We've had sandbox MMOs, but by and large, things like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, Guild Wars 2, like these things have just dominated the landscape, and they all take that kind of theme park model. And so I was so disappointed whenever Amazon switched gears, and not only because they were switching gears and we weren't going to have a new sandbox MMO, but also because it put them in direct competition with these companies that have this really established content drip pipeline. Really got to be hard to compete with. I actually don't. It seems to me like it would be a Herculean task to come out with a brand new MMO today that competes with the pipeline that these other companies have perfected over the last couple of decades. And so I guess my question is, maybe to you as somebody else who really appreciates sandbox gameplay, do you think if Ashes of Creation or Star Citizen or one of these sandbox games in development was able to ship without the deadline pressures come out, do you think it can give the theme park a run for its money?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you look simply at Minecraft, right? The ultimate sandbox. More very not MMO, but you can have servers, you can host people. You look at Minecraft, right? That released with like no real end game. I know it has like the Ender Dragon and an end game now, but honestly, the majority of people that play Minecraft is for the sandbox, right? It's a massive game. It's one of the biggest games in the world. Sandboxes can absolutely thrive. It's getting it there that's hard, because you need to make a sandbox that is inclusive. And I mean that in terms of it appeals to multiple players. You're going to have kids who want to build a pyramid over here. You're going to have kids that want to build a castle over here. It needs to be something that can appeal to multiple people. If everyone's building the same box, then nobody's having a really good time. But it's also going to have those systems that provide fairness, prevent griefing, because that's instantly what's going to happen. And I think that is probably the biggest deterrent to sandbox MMOs, is how do you keep people from ruining the experience for others, which is sad that we're fighting against ourselves in that respect. But I think that is the biggest issue, because you have a sandbox. I'm trying to think of some good examples, but you just have a sandbox environment and you let me build anywhere I want. We saw this with Dune Awakening, which I know is not really an MMO, but it's like it kind of touches on it. You have people in the deep desert now who build over resource nodes so that other players can't get to them, so they can hoard it for themselves. Okay, so now we need to be careful about where people can build. So we'll give them, let's say, nodes like in Ashes. Okay, now we need to make sure that there's materials around and that people can have ready access to those materials. But then you also need to worry about mob density And then you're starting to worry about players and how they might migrate through the world, which is one of my big kind of worries for Ashes is, are people actually going to migrate to all these nodes? How are you going to make sure it's enjoyable for player A to be on this side of the world and player B to be on this side of the world? And how do they interact, if at all? Or how can they interact if they want to? So I think Minecraft is the perfect example of, yes, sandboxes work. We've seen that. In an MMO space, the problem is you're now dealing with so much player behavior. You're dealing with the griefing. How do you combat that? And I think that's the biggest issue is games are, we see this with cheating in games. They're constantly fighting back against cheaters, against RMT. Like it's an uphill battle. So I think that's why you see so many MMOs look at sandbox and then say, no, we're going to go theme park. Because dealing with all of that behavior is so challenging. And of course, the community is its own worst enemy because everyone's got their own ideas, everyone's got their own thoughts. Everyone's going to scream when a quality of life feature isn't there, but then they're going to scream if you put it in at the same time. And I think we are just a bit of you are just screaming into the abyss. You just, like you are just screaming. Everyone is just screaming all the time. And I think as much as communities try to get through a consistent message, and of course on big topic issues they do, these smaller, minute details get lost in so much of the noise. But I think if we were to see, and again, it's about somebody having the freedom to, right? Like you've said, all the big publishers are going theme park. Nobody's trying to do sandbox except for these smaller studios, and it wouldn't work in that space. And we saw Amazon tried it and decided no for some reason, which still confuses me to a degree. So I think if we see one of those two big titles, I think it'll either be Star Citizen, or Ashes. I think one of them will succeed. My biggest thing with Star Citizen, I think it's been around so long that again, it's kind of getting lost in the noise. If it does have a proper release at some point, it'll probably get a lot of views there. But I think that just how long they've been in development might hurt that game a little bit. But I'm not in the loop on that, so I might be wrong. Yeah. But I think if we see one of those games succeed, like my Fortnite example earlier, we'll then see a lot of those bigger studios suddenly try to push a sandbox experience. It's the same way they were saying single player games are dead or single player RPGs are dead. It's like nothing in gaming is dead. You're just not doing it right. That's really what it comes down to.
Yep.
I think that as players, I think human beings are reactive, right? We're very reactive creatures. That's just what we do. I mean, that's what we do. We react to things in our environment. And I think that's the problem is the industry sees reactions to certain things. I think you mentioned it earlier, talking about PvP servers. Like you make PvP something that people don't want to engage in, and then everyone points it and says, well, look, nobody's having fun over there. Nobody wants PvP. Yep. So why are we doing it? But no, that's not the point. The point is you made it that way. So then people don't engage with it. You have to come back to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
And we're very bad at doing that.
Yep. Well said. I agree with you. I think that we're going to see some sandbox MMO take off. We're going to realize that this is the answer to the content drip. You don't have to compete with the content drip. You just have to give players something that they can breathe life into and watch them do that.
Yeah.
And in 10 years, whichever company succeeds at it, they'll be the new Blizzard. We'll start the cycle over again.
Yeah, exactly right. It'll be the next World of Warcraft. People try to emulate it. They'll inevitably start adding quality of life support or something like that. Yep. Quality of life buys and even though I know they've said they won't include those microtransactions, but they'll start doing it as they always do. Someone else will come into management. Steven will move on to his next project and someone will take over and change it day one. But that's and I'm going back to June as well, like talking about things that are releasing underbaked to a degree. There were just so many problems with Dune Awakening. As I know it's not, I know they marketed it as an MMO, then they took away that marketing at the end. So I know it's not an MMO, but it's kind of a shared space. Yeah. But they had a really good single player like PvE survival experience for the first like 70% of the game. And then they throw you into the deep desert, which at the time was suddenly complete PvP, very little to do. I remember just gliding for 10 minutes in a direction, picking up some spice and gliding 10 minutes in the other direction. And as much as I say I like travel, I'm sorry, there's a difference between like purposeful and like unpurposeful travel, right? Like there's a difference between I need to walk from this city to that city and I need to fly all the way over there because that's where they put the thing that I want. Then I got to fly back. So and that's where it comes down to. Somebody needed to look at that system and say, is this what players want? How are players going to grief this? Was the other big things that's what we're seeing now is people building bases over resource nodes when they flipped it to PvE. And it's taking the time to work through those issues, because same with combat. I'm aware there were some issues with combat in the beta before release, but they had to release, didn't they? Imagine if Dune had another 6 months of development under its belt. Imagine if it really fleshed out that end game, really had some good PvE. Because I love the PvE. PvP I didn't mind, but I couldn't find a good space to engage in PvP because the deep desert was all just thopters flying around. Yeah. Like I could barely land to engage in some good PvP, and half the time I landed, somebody getting their thopter fly up and then shoot me rockets. And it's about taking a step back and thinking about what your end game is going to look like, thinking about what those player interactions are going to look like. Because if you'd asked the devs what is PvP going to look like in that game before it released, I doubt they would have said it'll be 99% thopter fights. I think they fully expected players to land and duel it out, but they don't, because that's not what you've designed. You've designed a place where the floor is lava and you can only fly. So players are going to shoot people out of the sky. And that's what I keep going back to, is like, they need a little bit more time, and that's fine. But we're allergic to giving companies more time on these things. We are. And players are equally as responsible for that. Company announces a delay, and of course, half of the comments are let them cook, the other half are burn them down.
Yeah. I've been playing a lot of Dune Awakening. I actually really have enjoyed the game, but I couldn't agree more that they needed more time on the end game. Once you get there, it's
look, I loved it. I mean, I made a video on it as well, because I played entirely solo as well as my solo play. Played entirely solo, and I was loving it. I was in love with that game. The survival aspects, there were a lot of bugs here and there, but I was thoroughly enjoying it. And then there was a complete disconnect between that and that end game experience. It was crazy to me that it was so significant, a change in like gameplay style and feel, and it's like playing WoW, and then you get to the end and it's suddenly a first-person shooter, and you're just like, what the hell happened here? Like, how did we change from what we were playing to this?
Yeah. Early on in this discussion, you spoke out against pay to win pretty candidly. When it comes to this final, really hot button issue in MMOs and gaming, what kind of monetization are you okay with in a game, if any?
I'm not a big fan of any, to be honest. I would be thrilled to go back to the days of just buying a game and playing a game and not having any horse armor.
Subscribing?
I don't mind subscribing. I don't mind subscription as a model. I don't know the complete financial implications, but I understand running and maintaining an MMO is quite costly compared to, obviously, shipping me Call of Duty as an example. So I've got no problem with subscriptions. I don't even have that much of a problem with cosmetics. I'm not that bothered about cosmetics. What I don't like is when cosmetics begin to look better than end game grinded gear. I hate the idea that I can get to the complete end game of I'll use WoW, farm all the best stuff, craft all the best stuff, and then have some guy walk past me wearing something that looks insanely ridiculous that I have to pay for. Or somebody walking by in like a banana suit. I don't want to see like a banana suit in something like WoW, for example. I need it to be thematic. I don't want us to, because I know Call of Duty's gone down the Fortnite route, right? No. And I've not, and I should say, I keep mentioning Call of Duty. I've not played that in probably a decade at this point. I've dabbled, but I've not properly played it in a good 10 years. Which is why I see stuff now, and I see like a skin for Beavis and Butthead, or I see a skin of a banana, or like Nicki Minaj or something, and I'm just like, what has happened? What has happened to that game? It's so thematically off. So I'm okay with cosmetics, but I despise most of all quality of life things that you can buy. Being able to buy quality of life, because it is the most pay to win experience, but it is shrouded in the fact that, well, actually you could do this, so it's not technically pay to win. You could buy a sword off me and slay Grolo with it, or I could also sell you this 1 hour XP boost that'll make sure you're 2 levels above him in in a couple hours type thing. I hate that, and I hate watching players defend it. I'm sorry, but if you defend quality of life as something you can pay for, they've got you. They've got you by the balls at that point, because they are just waiting to sell you a sword down the line. So my view is, it shouldn't touch anything. Money should not touch a single thing in relation to progression, in relation to quality of life, in relation to power. Looks, fine. As long as it's thematic, I'll deal with it. If it's how you fund your game, I'm not a big fan, but it's okay. But yeah, pay to win. I mean, like ultimately at the end of the day, if I jump on, I put the time I put into the game, especially now as somebody that obviously works full time, has some hobbies, a social life and stuff like that. I can't commit the amount of time I could when I was, 15, but that's fine. I'll commit what I can commit to. I'll grind as far as I can grind. I don't want somebody to just be able to walk in, throw a credit card down, and fly to the end. I like achievements in games to actually be something somebody's achieved rather than something they've just potentially paid for. Because then it, again, removes you from the world. I come back to the idea of I want to experience this world. I want to be able to walk down the street and know that guy over there with a cool armor, he has done some really cool shit to get that armor. He has completed, whatever the pinnacle might be. And I love those. And those are chase items to me. I want chase items. I don't want to be able to just buy whatever the chase item is. I don't want to have to, and I don't want to have to buy to be able to play the dungeons that are in the game. I don't want to have to buy entries like in Lost Ark and Throne of Liberty. That I detest more than anything in hindsight. But that's pay for convenience. So that's my views. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by that. I could have come out here and said I loved it, but I'm not crazy. I'm not going to commit YouTube suicide on that one. But what are your thoughts? I'd be surprised if you thought differently, but I'm happy to hear it.
I don't think much differently. Earlier in the series, I was saying the same thing. Cosmetics, most people seem to be semi-okay with them, and cosmetics drive me crazy for exactly the reasons you're talking about. I can't associate anything that I'm seeing with in-game effort. That drives me nuts.
Yeah, I love it again, it removes from the world. Yeah. It removes from the world because, you see it. You can see it in-game. I hate seeing something and saying, oh, that's from the shop. That's $15 real life. I'm here to play a game. I'm here to escape reality. I'm not here to experience reality. I can walk down the street and see somebody holding a Louis Vuitton bag and know how much that. Well, I won't know how much that costs because I don't care. But I don't want to be in a game and see something I can relate monetary value to because it removes me from the experience. I'm there to play a game. I'm there to see this cool shit. I'm in a world where dragons exist and you can slay dragons and possibly get a really cool sword. I want to see somebody walking around with that sword. I don't want to see somebody walking around with the skin of a sword that's in a movie or another video game. It completely takes you out. And I think MMOs specifically, a lot of people play them to be immersed. I know there's big role-playing communities out there. There's a reason people navigate to MMOs is so they can have that experience, have that grinding experience, and get to the point where they can show off the achievements they have in this world, this massively multiplayer world. But the moment you can pay for any of that, or pay to look different, a lot of that goes out the door. You lose it really quickly. It's almost like the walking argument again, where you can say, oh, well, just let them fast travel. I'll just let them buy cosmetics. But it does detract from the world in different ways you're not considering.
Yeah.
But it's become the norm at the same time. So I don't think we're going to, I mean, Ash has microtransactions, or will have them rather. Maybe it has them already. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think it does. But I think it's part of the world now. I dislike it. I'd like to see us go back where we don't have any of that, but I just don't think it's possible. I think it's possible we win the pay-to-win argument as gamers, and we don't have pay-to-win enter a lot more games in the future. Microtransactions and skins, though, they're going to be here forever. As much as I don't like that, I think they're here forever.
Yeah, sadly. I totally agree on paying for convenience. Like, if a game locks you out of doing something and charges you to do more of it, yeah, totally no. The only potential area I might feel a little bit different, and I don't know if I do or not, but and this is something that has changed in my thinking relatively recently in the past few months, because I used to be staunchly against this too. But the one thing that I believe is that even in games that don't have pay to win, or that the publisher does not offer some way of paying for power, players seem to construct these things themselves. You see it in RMT and just about any MMO out there. There's entire websites where you can just go and get any item or any amount of gold you want. So obviously the market is there whether traded or not. And so there's two games. Well, one is World of Warcraft. The other one is EVE Online, that have constructed basically a USD, or whatever your local currency is, to in-game currency through game time. So in EVE Online, they sell something called a Plex, which you can buy for a certain amount of real-life money. It represents 30 days of game time because that's a subscription game, or that's an optional subscription. It used to be required. And then you can sell that on the open market, and then other players who are generating money, they can buy that and use that to pay for their game instead of whatever. So basically, this is a way of you buying in-game currency.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft does the same thing now with the WoW token and retail, and even certain versions of Classic have introduced it now. Surprisingly, I have evolved to the point where I'm okay with that.
Really? Okay.
Only because...
What brought you around?
Only because in every game I've played, that system already existed outside of the publisher. Right? People just went to these third-party websites, Asian resellers, whatever, and they're... I have just seen decades of companies ineffectively fighting this. And so it's already part of the game anyway. And so I would rather, if it's already part of the game, I would rather the person responsible for operating the game offer it to everybody.
Yeah, so it's more harm. It's harm mitigation essentially. You see it's already happening, so why not mitigate it? At least let the company somewhat control the faucet.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer, but I'll ask anyway. If somehow a company figured out a way to completely remove RMT, I assume you would want the game time options to go away?
Yes. Yeah. If we could completely remove it, I would be all for it.
It's a necessary evil.
Yeah. If we could truly completely remove it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of those, but I completely agree and understand the sentiment at the same time. Would you rather, that controlled by the company or the sellers? Because it's how do you stop people trading in-game wealth when that is one of the systems that you have as a core part of your gameplay? You can't have systems that are too strict because you're going to flag people all the time. Yeah. So I understand where you're at there. I'm not willing to accept it, but I agree that
I completely understand that
the best way to go.
Yeah. The only problem I have with it, which if another game comes out and it attempts this model, I would want to see them address this, is that the games that do have that, inflation goes like this, because you have more players swiping cards, a lot more credits are in the economy, things go up in cost, but what I don't see is them increasing what you can get through in-game effort. So if I just go out and actually play the game, like the value of what I'm doing continuously goes down because all the swipers are going up, right? So if you're going to introduce a system like that, I would like to see that solved. But
it seems like a bit of a chicken and I'm terrible with economics. It does seem like a bit of a chicken and egg scenario there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where just introducing it into the world, you automatically push the cost up. I hadn't necessarily thought about that.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare. I mean, RMTing, I'm sure it's a topic that's been talked to death on this discussion and on your channel as well. I just really don't understand. I understand why people do it, but it's one of the craziest things to me that people will spend real money on that stuff.
I know. But here we are.
Yep.
Is there any hot button issues?
The player base being its own worst enemy.
I know. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, it's just like the ball you were talking about, shaving the corners until you get a ball that rolls down a hill. Let's turn every game into a contest of swiping our card. I don't get it.
Absolutely right.
Oh. Well, with RMT and pay to win out of the way, is there any hot button issues we missed that you can think of? Or that you want to talk about?
Not necessarily. There's nothing in particular that comes to mind for me. I think I just keep going back to the idea of we need to give these companies more time. That's realistically the biggest thing to me, is they need more time to actually make these games. And I think that is the biggest issue MMOs have, is that they take so long to build. They take so much planning. They take so many resources that actually making one is just a mammoth task that realistically most small devs are never going to get the chance to do. Somebody like Steven, like you said, he's invested his own money. He's probably got other private investors, and obviously they're selling alpha keys now, so they're making some money off that.
Yeah.
But if Steven wasn't there, that project would be entirely canned, right? Whether as a creative director, I understand it was all his idea, but if he's had the same group of people, as an example, without that funding, they're screwed. They can't do anything, which I know is a lot of games, but MMOs in particular fall to that, and I think that is the biggest downfall for it. The second being the player base, because you have to spend so much time in development managing the player base. So I mean, you're never going to change that. That's the double-edged sword of it. There's always going to be griefers. There's always going to be RMTers. But I just keep coming back to the idea that you don't need to deal with that at bullshit in FPS. You don't need to deal with that kind of stuff in a game like Baldur's Gate. It's so specific to MMOs, and there's a lot of griefing in FPS and other games as well, but it's not as impactful as an MMO. You get griefed in an MMO and you feel it, especially when there are those high risk systems. We talked about Tarkov earlier. I love Tarkov because it's high risk, high reward. Or, well, actually, no, to be fair, it's more so that you can navigate what level of risk you're willing to put in, but that level of risk directly impacts your levels of success. So I can go in with nothing but a pistol and a single bullet. I could get everything in the world from somebody, but if I miss, I'm pretty screwed. Trying to translate that similar system to MMOs is incredibly hard. And I think that's what they're trying to do in Ashes. They're trying to do it so the corruption is there, but just managing the player base is so difficult. And I think that's why that cost has gone up so significantly for those MMOs, because managing the player base is your biggest issue. As well as creating the content's one thing, but it's managing player bases that are such a complex issue now, both in communication as well as what they're going to experience in game. It's not really an issue to discuss, but
yeah,
that's kind of my thinking on it. That's why MMOs are struggling, and I'm not blaming the players because it's obviously a small subsect. It's like a smaller percentage of players, but they have the biggest impact, and how you deal with them is almost impossible for me to determine. I have no clue. How to solve that, but I think it is the biggest problem.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of what we talked about here. Yeah, I'm with you.
Very doomer outlook.
Sorry, I don't think it's doomer because I think
views on the gaming industry.
I think we both agree that we do believe these things can be solved. I mean, we see hope. We see the crowdfunding model working with other types of games, and we're we haven't seen it produce an MMO yet, but there's a couple underway. So one of these could be the one that proves us.
Oh, I think that's perfect point. I think we've seen every other type of game crowdfunded, and I would probably say successfully.
Yeah,
I mean, I can only point to a few that I know about. There's probably 101 that I don't know about. But like you said, don't think we've seen any MMOs done before. None crowdfunded. We now have two that are really, especially Star Citizen. Obviously, everyone knows. I think every gamer would know Star Citizen by name. You've got two that are really pushing and have a real chance. So if they both fumble it at the end, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare for gamers, I think. But I reckon over the next decade, we will see a shift back towards letting people actually make what they need to make. I think it'll almost become a bit like Hollywood in the sense of you've got big directors that people are willing to just throw money to them and let them do their thing. I think you're going to get to the point where you have creative directors in gaming. You throw the money, they do their thing. I think the biggest issue is those people have been pushed out of the market pretty heavily by the profit-driven, industry we have now, where they're all pushing heavily for profits. I think if we see some big crowdfunded games work, we're going to start seeing people be given that freedom. But it's a lot of money, and like that's it, right? It's so much money to risk on someone.
Yeah.
But I think you need that consistent vision. I think that's why Ashes is moving in a positive direction. I can't necessarily speak for Star Citizen if it's kind of one person's kind of vision or if it's a
one person. It's Chris Roberts.
Yeah, there you go. And I think that's why you're seeing some success in those areas, because it is somebody with a clear vision. They're not new worlding it. They're not 80% of the way through and then deciding to pivot at the last second because something else has been pretty hot and worked well for them, or because they're seeing backlash that they don't fully understand. You need a gamer at the helm of these things. What was I looking at recently? Sorry, I'm going off topic again. I know we're trying to wrap up here. I was saying to some friends, the biggest issue with so many game companies is they don't hire anyone with any gaming experience. They just don't do it. They don't get someone in the room who knows how players are going to react. They don't have a good change manager, communications person. They don't have somebody who's on the creative team who plays games regularly. Because so many issues I see in gaming either come down to the fact that publishers rushed it out, or they've not considered for a moment how this is going to impact the player base. They just haven't. And I'm trying to think of a good example. I guess Dune Awakening is probably a half decent one. You need somebody to sit down in the room and say, hey, the first half of our game looks like this. The second bit looks like this, but we're marketing this. So how are we going to make sure this aligns? How are we going to make sure these things align? Or again, Amazon and New World. We're building out the PvP game. We've already know that a lot of people are a bit stressed about that. Are we going to change course? Because if we're going to change course, you have to do it at the start. You can't do it at the end. You can't make sweeping changes like that. So you got to have that consistent vision. And a lot of it's going to come down to you got to take risks. You got to take those risks. And I think that's what these companies aren't understanding. They've seen a lot of things like Fortnite fluke its way to the top. You know, that game was never supposed to be a battle royale, but that just worked for them. And it just, you know, they then built something incredible off it. You just have so many games release and they just don't know what to do with them. Or you can see that the vision changed partway through. And I don't understand. I think about I'll talk one last point about the Battlefield 6 beta that happened over the weekend. Battlefield to me has always been large-scale PvP combat, like 128 players, blah, 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 the Battlefield experience they used to sell to everybody. And they've lost that. This weekend was 3 small maps. And I was saying to my friend, I think the next weekend, I've heard that they're planning to show us the bigger maps. But the problem is you've just shown the entire world Battlefield in a box. You've not shown them what the actual vision is. You've shown them this picture instead of showing them the whole thing. And of course, that's going to turn some people off. You plan to show them the big picture later, but if you show me this is what I'm expecting. And that's what I keep coming back to. It's like you've got to understand and set correct player expectations, and you've got to communicate with them effectively, and you've got to think like a gamer too. You really do have to sit down. Again, I talk about New World having 6,000 available server slots for Oceanic when it released. And instantly queue times were in the tens of thousands, if not higher. It was 30,000 when I was trying to first get into the goddamn game. It must have been much higher for people who can. And I clicked play like 2 minutes in. I made the shittiest character I could, press play, I was 30,000 in queue. But again, all I need is a gamer to be in the room and say, hey, I see for the Oceanic region you've got 6,000 available slots. Just going to remind you that quite a number of millions of people live in that area. Are we sure that's enough? Because first impressions matter, and I think these companies forget that. They matter immensely. But I'll leave it there.
I mean, for somebody who claims to not have a whole lot of MMO experience, I think you have some incredibly insightful thoughts on why things are the way they are. So it was really great to get those out of your head.
Look, I try to. And that's why I started doing this, because I love talking about games. I love video games as a medium. It's just disappointing to see where we've come.
Yeah. Your comments around like the person with the vision at the top being so important to the success of any product or project resonates with me. I've talked about that on this channel a lot. Even outside of gaming, it's true everywhere you look. With tech, that's just the field I'm very familiar with, so I can talk about the visionaries in tech who, same thing. It's kind of like the iPhone or the iPod, right? Like Microsoft was basically already a multi-bazillion dollar corporation ran by a committee. Like, they could not have made the iPod or the iPhone, but Apple was sitting there on its deathbed, run by one man, and they produced it. So it's the same thing.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Because it brings us exactly back to what I said earlier around you mix all the paints together, you get brown.
Yeah.
If you get a committee involved, you've got 20, 30 people making a decision, they're always going to come to the same conservative decision.
Yeah.
You need somebody out there who's going to take a risk, and it is a risk. Yeah. But let's be honest, what isn't a risk? And especially in the gaming market, if you release mediocre games, you're going to get mediocre reception. That is the clear and obvious answer. All these companies are chasing a unicorn. They're chasing somebody with a vision to make them a game that is going to be Fortnite. It's going to be next Call of Duty. That's a franchise that spans decades, or WoW. But they're not going to get that by committee decision making. You need someone with a very, very clear view and a vision of what they want their game to be, because then they will help guide everyone to that single point. Whereas, like we talked about, you could have the WoW team deciding, we're going to add this quality of life feature because the communications person who's getting all the feedback says the players really want fast travel. Well, that person hasn't considered all the ramifications a fast travel system will have. Because now it means players can dart across the world without doing anything. It's going to mean less gathering because they're not walking and picking shit up on the way. It's going to mean less blah, 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 and so on and so on. You need that vision. And I hope that we get back to that space, because we see it for movies. I mean, for God's sake, movies, books, all other forms, songwriting. Well, songwriting, to be fair, at some levels, it's 20 different people working on a song, and that's why they're the most generic songs over here. No. But again, we come back to any other type of artistic medium, and gaming is an artistic medium in a lot of ways, or at least for the parts that gamers really enjoy. A lot of it is an art. All of those in other industries are made generally by a couple of people, a few at most. And usually there's somebody there who's responsible for it at the end of the day. You need that in gaming. We need to bring that back into games instead of it just being an executive who makes the final call because he's looking at budget numbers.
Plus 1,000, Born Reddy.
Yep.
Thanks so much for coming on, man. This has been an awesome chat.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. I'm always, like I said, always down to talk about gaming. I love it. I go on way too many of these rants. My stream chat is kind of used to it by now. I tend to rant about the capitalist issues that we have in this industry in particular. But look, as cynical as I am, I'm always hopeful that there'll be something around the corner. I think we've got a good few projects on the rise. I think we've seen the final deterioration of AAA and the success of a lot of indies that are pushing us back in that upward trajectory. But yeah, look, I love this series. I like what you're doing here. I was listening to quite a few of these before I obviously jumped on. I love gaming discussions. This stuff is my bread and butter. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Speaking of your stream and stuff, why don't you tell folks like what you're all about, what you're up to, where they can find you?
Oh, I mean, they can mostly just find me on YouTube and Twitch. I only stream twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. my time. So it's Australian Western Standard Time. In terms of YouTube, I aim to release a video every week just talking about a variety of things. Honestly, last couple of weeks, it's been Titan Quest 2, Ashes of Creation. It might be a Battlefield video this week. So it's very variety gaming content. And that's kind of what I'm committing to. So if you're looking for me, just be a heads up. It's not all going to be MMO focused.
Awesome. Spectacular. Well, again, thanks, man. It was really good meeting you and having this chat. Maybe we'll chat again someday again. This has been great. And hopefully the civil back and forth maybe douse the flame somewhere if on our part.
Fingers crossed. We can hope. But yeah, next big MMO update. So let's catch up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you everyone for tuning in and joining us in this chat. Hope you all enjoyed being here as much as we enjoyed having you. We'd love to continue the conversation with you all in the comments below. Until then, we're out.
Catch you later.